Alright, good morning. I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and this is video 3 for the Katelynn bag, purse as it is. I didn't intend to make this into 3 videos, but when I was making the second one, I just ran out of time trying to run around and do other stuff here in the shop too. So long story short, it's now a 3-part video. Then let's make matters a little bit worse. I started up the video earlier today and went to sew that gusset onto this piece right here. I did it on the Class 26 sewing machine. It looked great on the video, but now the video's lost. I do not know. I really need to become more video literate to continue all this, but I just don't have time. If I did, we'd already be putting out a lot more videos. So anyway, on that video, that was it. I sewed this on. I explained that I should have burnished this area before I sewed that on, but I had forgotten to. And I dyed these little pieces, and I used a dauber to dye them because it's such a small area, I don't care. Dauber dyeing is notorious for color distortion and stuff like that. Like, you'll have areas where you got too much dye, areas where you didn't get enough dye. But these are going to be folded up like that, and none the wiser. No one will see it. It's okay, because then this part's going to fold over the gusset, and it's hard to see the color or the difference in colors if you can't hardly see it. What these little pieces are, though, is they're going to go on the gusset, this main gusset piece that we've arranged in the last video. They'll go. You'll sew that D-ring into it right there. So let's just go ahead and do that. It's a 5/8 inch D-ring. Okay. So I will stitch or rivet that little D-ring in there. I don't have any rivets that are the nickel color, or else I'd just rivet it. But then after that is stitched, I'm going to put it over here and attach it to the purse itself just by wrapping that around like that. And then when I sew this gusset piece together, those will be sewn onto it, and that'll be our little D-ring hanger for the shoulder strap later. All right. So, without further ado, what I need to do is I need to go ahead and put the D-rings on these and sew them down. All right. I'm going to use a little bit of glue to hold them together, so that that's an easier job. So I'm just going to put a dab of glue, contact cement as it may be, right there, and then on the inside right here. Now I don't want to fold that little piece too far down, because if I do, it'll make it difficult to fold this piece around the gusset. Okay, so I'm going to leave that piece to where the end of it here only folds right about even with the tops of that. So I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on the other one here so that we can do that. Alright, and then I'll put that other D-ring on the other one here. And get that ready to fold over. Okay. While I'm waiting on that glue to set up, because it's a little bit thick there, I'm going to go ahead and pause the camera so you don't have to wait with me for about 2 minutes while we wait on that glue to set up. And when I'm done, we will fold it over, stitch them up, and then connect them to this. And I'm just going to run a couple of machine stitches right across there. Super easy, super fast. Alright, so I got the glue stuck on these, and now it's time just to close them over. Again, I'm not going to cross this little imaginary line right here for fear that it would get too hard to bend it over the gusset here in a little bit. So there's one and two. Make sure everything's going to fold over just fine and everything, and then I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm just going to run about 3 stitches across that. Again, I would actually use a rivet if I had the right color, but I don't, and I'm real big about not mixing hardware. It just looks bad. So I'm just going to run a couple of dark brown stitches right across, just under where the actual D-ring is in there. And when I come back, that'll be done. We're going to place them on this and glue them down, and then we're going to sew this thing together. So give me a minute. Alright, so I got those sewn together. Here they are. Like I said, just a couple of stitches right across them. Now I'm going to glue them to the gusset of the bag. Alright. Now, ordinarily, I would be a stickler for sewing something before I did any edge work. But I'm thinking, since we're going to wrap this around the outside of this, we'll probably have a much cleaner edge if we go ahead and do our edge work on this piece first. So I'm going to take me a small edger here. This is about 8 ounces combined, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to take me a little edger and I'm just going to run it around. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to sand it first. So let me spin you around to the sander. Alright. A little bit of sanding. Anytime you're using a power sander, make sure not to apply a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure equals friction. A lot of friction equals burnt leather. Burnt leather equals not a very good finished edge, because then you got to sand all the burnt leather off. So all I'm doing is just very lightly pressing it up against the sanding wheel there, and I'll let the grit of the sandpaper do the job. So I want to say that's about 120 grit sandpaper, possibly 180. I don't recall. So got that all nice and flat. Now I'm going to run my edger around it, and we're going to use some Ron's Edge Rub or indelible burnishing solution, whichever one I have closest to me, and we're going to burnish that down right quick. So I'm running my edger all the way around. It's always a little bit more difficult on these outside curves. There we go. Flip it over and do it one more again. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to take that dauber I was using earlier that I dyed these little things with, and I'm just going to dye those edges down right quick. Just want them a nice dark brown. I'm a little off camera there, I apologize, but all I'm doing is going around the edge with a dauber. Alright, make sure I don't have any naked leather that didn't get dyed. Perfect. I'm going to set this dauber and this dye bottle off to the side on a different table. So I'm going to use them again, and I don't want to bump into them until then. Let's see what I've got here. Got a little bit of Ron's Edge Rub right here, so I'll use it because it's closest. Like I said, I also sometimes use the indelible burnishing solution if I'm going to dye an edge. But for a dyed edge, those are my two ways to go. If I'm doing edge ink, I don't dye the edge first. So just wiping this Ron's Edge Rub onto all the edges here, all the way around. Ordinarily I'd break this down into maybe do like half of this long edge at a time, but in an effort to not make you watch me do this for an hour, I'm gonna go ahead and furnish a little quicker. Okay, I'm not really happy with how that turned out. I mean, a little bit more friction here. There we go. All right. So now that that's done, I can glue these to it. And where I'm going to glue them is I just want the top of the D-ring right at the top of the gusset. Okay, and that way they'll be the same on both sides, and everything will work out great. So I need to put a little dab of glue on this thing. I could also just use some double-sided tape, but my glue's right here, and my tape's like 1.5 feet over there. It's just so far. A little dab of glue here, and then I'm going to have to just set this up here to measure where the glue is going to go on this edge, or on this gusset. There we go. And then the same spot on the back side. Now there's a slight possibility that these could be a little bit different, because again, I didn't measure anything when I folded them down. I just folded them down. So I'm going to make sure that I keep the left one by the left side and the right one by the right side, and whatever. Okay, and then once again I got to hold it up here, see where I need to put the glue on the gussets. There it is. And then the exact same thing on the other side. There we go. Put the glue away. And I'll pause the video while I wait for about a minute and a half for that glue to set up. Alright, so here we are. I'm just going to tack these little bad boys on here. Again, where the top of this is just right at the top of that, of the gusset there. Stretch them in a little bit, glue them down. And I'll do the same thing over here. Alright, now, next thing I'm going to do is glue around, or sew around this gusset right here. Okay. Now when I do that, I want to make sure that I get all the layers of this gusset under the sewing machine. Okay. If I try to sew way out on the edge, especially in the curves, it's really difficult. So why not bring that stitch line in a little bit to where maybe it's like 3/16 of an inch or so in, and then we actually have a good sew line, as opposed to trying to put it right on the edge and we find out later that we missed the bottom layer. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we're going to sew that up. Alright, there it is. Lots of bobbin. So here we go. I'm going to start out on this side over here, right at the top. And again, I'm not sewing right on the very edge. I'm giving myself some leeway there. I'll hold my top threads. I need to go in reverse for a couple of stitches. I know my hand's in the way, and I apologize. It's going to be out of the way in just a minute. There we go. back into forward. And when we get to that area with the D-ring, we're just going to climb right up over it and keep on stitching. Okay, so lift my presser foot to get it up over it. There we go. Alright, now we're going to sew down and around the whole thing. Again, I'm trying to be careful not to sew any folds into this curve. Okay, we can get that nice and stretched out if we don't accidentally sew a fold into it. And it'll be a natural looking curve. But if we sew a fold into it, not so much. Back to a corner, making sure we don't sew a fold into it. Back over here to where this strap holder is. Oops. There we go. Climb up over it. Keep stitching to the top. And then my back stitch. Looks like we did good. We got all our layers and everything in there. Looks good. Alright. Clean up these stitches and stuff, and a couple of people have tried to come into the office while I was doing this part, so I'm going to pause the video and talk to them, and then I will be right back with you. Alright folks, so we now have a completed back panel, a completed front panel, and a completed centerpiece. We need to attach them all. My advice is that we're going to attach the front panel first, because the back panel has the big flap on it, and it's just going to kind of get in the way as we're sewing other pieces. So we might as well just make it last. So I'm going to pre-stretch this corner here, and then I'm going to move over here and pre-stretch this other corner here. And then I'm going to start sticking it together. So I got to put glue on the back of this, just on the edges, and then also on the very edge of this on the inside. Okay, so, and it can help to just fold this back a little bit like that, and then you can get your glue brush and everything, and it also kind of holds form a little bit better. So that's what I do. And I'm going to try to get, I'm not going to use an excessive amount of glue by any means, but I am going to try to get it all the way to the edge of the leather, because then, once again, we'll have nicer, cleaner edges once we've burnished. Just putting it on the outside 1/4 of an inch or so, especially in the corners, making sure getting it to where when I stick it together, it'll lay real nice and flat in there. Now, it might help to mark your centers and glue this together from the center out. But I'm pretty confident in my pattern that I won't need to do that. So let's hope that that works out, because there's nothing worse than messing up on camera. Alright, so there's that piece. Now I'm going to run a bead of glue around this piece. Go. Once again, I'm going to just pause it and let that glue set up, and when I get back we'll stick it together. Alright, so since I didn't mark the centers to start, at the middle to stick this, I'm going to stick the corners first. So I'll stick it right here, and I'm going to put a little clip on it to kind of hold on to it for me, and then I'll move over and do the other side as well. But I do want to make sure that my edges are lined up nice and even, or I'll have problems further down. Okay, so I put a clip on that side. Now I'm going to line up this side. Put a clip on it. Now I'm simply going to walk both these sides down a little bit. Just sticking the edges together as I go. And I'm going to do it on both sides down to the corner. And then once I get to the corner, I'll kind of look at my spacing and make sure everything's going to be okay before going around the corners and kind of finalizing anything. Alright, and it looks like everything's going to line up okay. I do need to, where this accidentally stuck together. So I'm going to work my way around each corner one at a time. Just sticking the edges perfectly together. So there's one. And the other. Alright, and then everything else lined up fine, so I'm just going to press it together as I go. Okay, so there's what we've got. That's going to be a good edge to sew. I don't predict any problems at all. We're going to go over to the sewing machine and sew it together, and it would be so easy to sew it with this side up, and you could be able to watch the corners and all that. But we always sew with our finished side facing up, so we're going to put it in there this way, and so it'll start right here and work its way down and around. Everything's going to be great. So I'll spin the camera around. There we are. And again, I'm going to start, let me check this bobbin one more time. I'm going to start right here. I'll hold my threads here, and I'll I've got my reverse lever down with my arm. And now we're going to go forward. And there will be difficult parts where it tries to pull away from your machine a little bit. You just got to kind of keep it straight. I probably should put my edge guide on this machine, but I like to think that I'm decent enough sewer that I don't always need it. I could be wrong. There's actually a probability that I'm wrong. Alright, there we go. That one's done. Now I'm going to go back to the desk. I'm going to do the exact same thing, gluing and sewing the back to it. Trying to keep turning this tripod around without getting the cords tangled up into it too much. Alright. Trim off my tails here. Alright, so again, I'm going to do the exact same thing on the back side here. Okay, I'm going to pre-stretch my corners. I'm going to put glue on this and on that, and I'm going to stick them together. And when I come back, we will sew this together on the machine. Alright, so here we are. I have glued the back portion onto it. And now when I go to sew this, I'm going to sew all the way around. And I want to do that because I want there to be a nice stitch line around the front of the bag. Doesn't have to be one, but that's what I want to do with it. So I'm going to pause this, I'm going to get the sewing machine set up. I'm actually going to put my edge guide back on it like I ought to have, and because up here on the very front I really want to make sure those stitches are good and pretty. And when I come back, we'll be at the machine. Alright, so I got my edge guide put back on the machine here, and it doesn't really matter where I start or stop this as long as I'm not starting it right up here. So I'm going to start it back here a little bit. If I start it right up here, my thoughts are always when I'm sewing something, if I create the beginning and end point where there's a lot of pressure, then it might have an easier time pulling loose. And since this bag flap is separating from the bag right there, I thought that might be a bad place to do it. So I'll just back it up a couple of inches further down the bag, and we'll do it there. I don't need to back stitch because I'm going all the way around the bag. And I did not check, yeah, I should have enough bobbin to make it all the way around. And again, I'm giving myself a lot of border to sew on, because there's just no need to try to get it all the way up on the edge. Now, sewing machines, when you go from a thicker area to a thinner area like I just did, they tend to, their stitch length expands a little bit, and it gets a little bit bigger stitch. So as I stepped off that step back there, I reached over and made my stitch length just one click shorter to try to keep it consistent. And that's all good and great as long as I remember to do the opposite when I get back up on the thick spot on the other side of the bag. There we go. Getting back towards the thick part to go around the body of the bag again. And as I get up to it, I'm going to adjust that stitch length out a little bit again. There we go. Now I'm just going around the body the same as I did with all the other gusset areas, making sure that the corner doesn't get sewn into a curve or a fold, and that it remains just a gentle curve. Alright, back to my beginning stitch, so I'll make sure I'm in the exact same hole I started out at, and then I'll go ahead and do a couple more stitches, and there we go. That sucker's done. Clip my threads, and we'll go back over to the table and finish some edges on this thing. Alright, cut my tails here. Now, when this bag is complete, this flap will fold over like so, and there's what we're looking at. I really like the dye job. This is the first one of these I've made that I actually hand dyed. The rest of them I just made out of pre-dyed leather. But we need to talk about this little mechanism right here. So this is a tuck clasp that I got at Tandy, and it is really, really good quality. I'm very impressed with this particular. I happen to have one of these just kind of in some hardware I had, and it actually was still in the baggie that showed me what the part number was and everything, and I looked, and sure enough, no matter how old that thing, who knows how old that one was, but they still had them in their inventory and everything, so I bought a ton of these for the mystery box this month. And anyway, again, it's a very high quality piece. It's the metal's nice, it's finished well. I'm excited to use these. Now, how do these work, Aaron? So, you have 3 main pieces and 2 itty bitty screws. Again, this is a tuck clasp, let's see, tuck clasp large nickel plates is what the Tandy label says. So here are our pieces. Okay, now I could have set this piece onto here before I started, but I didn't, because I need to make sure that it's in exactly the right spot when this is all put together. I want this thing to fold over and pretty much meet it right there. All right, so I need to center it right to left here, and that's where I'm going to put it. Is I want this right above the edge stitching there. And to assist me, I'm going to use a piece of rubber inside the bag. Okay, I need to measure my center. I'm just going to use an ink pen because it'll be covered up by that piece. Alright, so there's my center right there. And I want this thing just above, oops, sorry, the rounded part is down. I want it just above the stitch line. So I'm going to set it about right there over that center piece that I just did. And I'm going to push. Alright, and my pushing is not to go through the leather, it's just to mark the leather, so that I have this thing in the right spot. Okay. So now we have two little marks here, and I am going to make sure that they're perfectly perpendicular to the bottom here. And now I'm going to reach over here and grab just like a large sewing awl. We'll do fine with this. And I'm going to push that through. If you don't have a large sewing awl, you can use a knife or something. Just make sure you got some rubber or something in there to stop it on the backside from going through your project, as in through the next layer. All right. So I got those done. Oh, before you start that, make sure that these two prongs are sticking parallel to each other. If one of them's kind of in, and you make that mark and you punch those, then this won't set flat up against it once it's in there. Okay, so make sure that these are parallel, sticking straight up. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to push them through those little marks that I made, or those little holes I made. And the holes are too small, but that's okay. I'm pushing hard. I want it because if I made them big enough or even too big, then this thing would have slop in it. I want zero slop. Nobody likes slop. Okay, so I'm just pushing it down really hard. And I've got my fingernail on the back side just pushing it hard up against that clasp so that it gets in the right spot. And then I'm going to take this little piece of metal here and put it over those two prongs. And then I'm just going to bend the prongs towards each other. Now you can take a small thin piece of leather and glue over the top of all this to hide it, and that's what I highly recommend you do. Just any little scrap of like nice little thin leather, and that'll help hide this, the backside of it, and you won't see the bent over prongs and stuff like that in there. Okay, so I bent those down with my hand, and there we go. Looks pretty sharp there, I think. Now, what do we got to do here? I'm going to clasp this in there. I'm going to put, I've got to take the screws out of the back of it. Let me find a teeny tiny screwdriver and I'll be right back. Alright, so I got me a tiny little Phillips screwdriver, and I'm going to, I don't need to fully remove them, but I'm going to back out these screws out of the back and just barely leave them hanging. If you do this, just make sure that they're still hanging good enough that you're not going to lose them when you're moving this thing around. So shake it a little bit over an area that you're not going to lose them. Now, I'm going to put the clasp in the bag. Whoop, see, there went a screw. Screw it, I'll just take them off. Alright, so when you close the bag, these corners right here should line up with the sides of this pocket. And that's how you'll know it's good and centered. Alright. I'm going to take my ink pen and I'm going to mark on the ends of the flap where this thing sits. So I just made two little marks right there on the very end, where this thing sets. There's one and there's the other. I'll take it off. I need to put it on the edge, but I'm not going to actually finish putting it on yet because I need to burnish this edge. And again, this thing will be right up against the edge, so it's going to affect my burnishing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of halfway put it on so that it marks where these screw holes are going to be in the back. Alright, y'all are going to see me fidget with a screw for a second, sorry. That's why I didn't want to take them out. Alright, there's one. Almost. I don't do well with tiny little pieces. Two. Alright, and I'm going to screw these in about halfway or so. Alright, and then I'm going to close the bag and make sure it's all good and right and in the exact position I need it. When I'm doing this though, I'm going to make sure that those little backs of the screws don't scratch up my leather or my front piece of it. And it looks good. It looks like we're centered right to left just fine. So I'm going to move my camera a little. I'm going to take it back off now. I've marked, this has been marked where these screws are. So that'll make it a little easier to find, I hope, later. And then we're going to burnish that back edge. I don't really feel the need to burnish on camera because it'll make the video even longer again. We did some burnishing earlier in the video, so I think you got the gist of it. There we go. Alright, and there's my little holes right up into that stitch line, and that's okay. Because again, it's covered on both sides, none the wiser, and that stitch doesn't do anything other than decorate the front of the bag. So, I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to sand the back and the front pieces, and then I'm going to dye them and I'm going to burnish them, and when I come back we'll reinstall that clasp right there and talk over any last minute notes, and that's going to be it. We're going to have a bag. Alright folks, so we're going to wrap this up. I am done with the burnishing of my edges, and so I'm going to put my clasp back on it. Find my holes here. There we go. And yeah, so I'll reiterate again, the shoulder strap for this is going to be a very simple 5/8 inch strap, dyed dark brown, so I don't really feel a need to just make a strap on the video. If you have any questions about it, feel free to leave them in the comments and I can answer them if you do have a question about a shoulder strap. The reason I'm making it 5/8 is because that's the size of these D-rings, and then also from Tandy I got some little swivel snaps that are 5/8 as well. Yeah, so yeah, this project is pretty much in the bag. We are done with it, and it's time to upload this video so everybody else can finish theirs. So snap this together here, and yep, I'm in the right spot. So let me tighten these and I'll show you what we're looking at, and we're done. There it is. I'm not too sure about my color choice. It's kind of retro looking. I mean, I like it, but it's a lady's purse, so I don't know. So anyway, there it is. That is the Madison bag, or sorry, the Katelynn bag. It's named after my niece, and the Madison was the other bag I named after one. This thing looks kind of crooked, but it's just kind of how it's there. Now it's straight. So, thanks so much for joining us. Again, I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and please feel free to subscribe to our channel if you like what we're doing, and we'll teach more stuff. Have a great day.